hi everyone. Thank you for joining us for 15 minutes. I'm Andrew Huff. My guest today in the studio is the Honorable Lori Smith, King County Superior Court Judge. Judge Smith, thank you for being here today.
It's my pleasure.
You were appointed to the Superior Court in 2012. You're currently serving as the Chief Unified Family Court Judge. What is that role?
Well, as with all chiefs, we sort of are responsible in large part to the administrative duties of our department. For Unified Family Court, we have judges both in Kent and in Seattle that are handling family law cases, cases that have children. And then there are commissioners who are appointed by the judges to do motions work primarily, and they are involved in Unified Family Court as well. And so it's probably there are about 7 judges and about 5 family law commissioners, and together we handle the majority of the family law cases.
You handle cases involving, as you said, family law matters, support modifications, dependency cases. I would imagine dealing with families and legal issues must be difficult at times, is it?
It is. It's always very highly emotionally charged. You're dealing with the things that are most precious to people, their children, their families, and their money. And they're going through the worst time in their life because they're either separating or they're trying to renegotiate their lives and their children's lives, and then we come in and decide things for them, primarily, of course, because they can't decide them themselves, but still it's a difficult time for them. And some of the stories are very hard to hear. You have to make decisions in very difficult situations. And, you know, it takes its toll on us as well as on them. You have to be good to yourself when you're on this rotation.
I would imagine many times you just take these issues home with you and try and deal with them in your spare time in terms of the emotion and the impact that these decisions have. Is that something that you've sort of learned to deal with when you're handling these emotional issues?
You really have to, because that way leads madness. You have to find a balance between doing the best that you can for those families, knowing that you've done that, you're well prepared, you understand the law, the rules, their case in particular, you make the best decision you can, and then you have to move on. It's the rare case that sticks with you for a long time, although you tend to remember the facts of most of the cases forever.
You know, a colleague of mine who practices in this area says sometimes the best you can do in this area of law is take a negative situation and just make it a little bit better. Do you find that to be the case?
Certainly there are cases where that is all that you can do. My hope is that what we're doing in the moment will allow them to be better and more calm later on, that we deal with their hard issues in that moment, give them a little relief, maybe even relief from deciding it, and then they can move on and have a better life because we've resolved it for them at least.
Your Honor, I would imagine there are times when you sit around with your colleagues and you talk about, if I were in charge, what changes or modifications would I make to the family law court system? What modifications or changes do you think should be made to the system that would improve the system that you work in currently?
You know, we just need more resources. We need people to be able to go to drug and alcohol classes, parenting classes, mental health situations for children as well as adults. So we need the resources so that when we figure out someone has a problem, that we can send them there and they can actually get the help. Then things like childcare. I mean, that's huge. A safe place that you can leave your child while you can go to work. If we had that, so many more parents would be able to work and be able to support themselves. Young people need something to do when they're done with school and when their parents are at work. Our society doesn't do the best job of taking care of those kids when their parents are working and until their parents come home. And then helping people through the court system. In King County, we have a lot of help, but you know, a lot of help when you know nothing doesn't seem as much help as it actually is. And our court facilitators can't give legal advice, so while they can steer people in the right direction, help them get forms, give them instructions, really someone needs to talk to someone about their case, get advice about their case, and there just isn't a lot of resources for people to be able to do that.
Yeah, you and many other judges have mentioned the lack of resources. Is the state legislature, do you think, just not providing adequate resources to the counties to deal with these types of issues on a regular basis?
I think there's no money for them to do that. So yes, they
true.
are providing it, but it's not because, they're putting the money in some unworthy area. It's just there isn't enough money to go around. So yes, if we had more money, we would be able to do more, and it would be great if we got that from the legislature, but they need to get it from somewhere too.
You served as a deputy prosecutor for King County for about 20 years before joining the bench. Was becoming a judge a goal that you had in mind early on in your career?
No, not at all. I didn't even really want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a social worker. And then someone from Eastern Washington, actually Wazoo's Black Student Union, came and spoke at my high school to our Black Student Union and said that we should get a degree beyond the 4-year degree. And that was the first time I thought about what would I do if I didn't just go straight through and become a social worker. So I went to law school, thought I'd be a public defender, externed with a public defender association. Wasn't the best fit for me. Did an externship, a paid internship with the prosecutor's office, family support division. Found out that I really liked it. And then ironically, my first trial was a criminal trial, welfare fraud, because we did some criminal work in our
Sure.
area. So I worked there and sort of moved up the ranks and didn't really think about what would that next step be. And then I started to think, what would that next step be? And other people said to me, this is something you should think about.
Sure.
And in fact, Judge Clark, Pat Clark, was the first person who said to me, I really could see you as a judge. So family law commissioner position came open, and it seemed more a direct route from what I'd been doing to the next step. So I applied, the judges appointed me.
That's what you did before becoming a judge, was serve as a commissioner.
Correct.
You mentioned that you wanted to become a social worker early on. What was your influence to want to work with people and help people?
I really think it was just my parents. My dad was in the Air Force, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and some of my earliest memories, we were stationed in Guam. The men went off on temporary duty. We didn't know where they were a lot of the time. And the women all had parties and took care of the kids and took care of the airmen who didn't have families. So we were all sort of one big happy family. And my mom would always try to solve their problems. So she was everybody's helper. She was everybody's social worker. She was everybody's friend. And I saw the joy that she got from doing that and how she really could make a difference. And so I wanted to solve some injustices in society and help families. And that's why I thought social work would be a good thing.
With your father in the military, obviously he was away much of the time. I would imagine your mother was a very, very good multitasker.
She was.
Right?
She had to be. Yes. There were 4 of us, so she had 4 children, and we were various ages. My older sister was 7 years older than me. My younger sister was 6 years younger than me. So she had to take care of everything that was going on in the house, all of us individually, and still keep that contact with my dad.
You did your undergrad at Eastern Washington University. Did you grow up in Spokane?
My dad, his last base was Fairchild, which is near Spokane, and I was there through about middle school and mid-high school. Then when he retired, I went to John Rogers High School and then Eastern Washington.
Most people will tell you, most attorneys will tell you, when they go to law school, the first year of law school is always the most difficult. Do you find that the case?
It was for me. I didn't know anyone who was a lawyer. My mother had a few friends that were lawyers, but I didn't really know them. And so I didn't know what to expect from law school or being a lawyer. And you go there and you think, everybody's brilliant but me. And how did I get in here and I don't fit in? And I can't imagine that I'm going to survive this. And then, of course, they're training you to think in a particular way. And so I love creative writing. So that was sort of a struggle between the legal process and creative writing. And so I think I had a difficult first year. But in line, waiting to register, I met Mary Roberts, who was later became my roommate and is now a colleague on the Superior Court bench with me. So some really great things came out of my first year of law school.
Sure. Once you finished law school, I think you said you worked for the Public Defender's Office.
I did an internship with
You did
them.
an internship with them. That led to you joining the King County Prosecutor's Office, where again you worked there for about 20 years. What was your experience like working as a deputy prosecutor?
It was a wonderful experience. The Family Support Division was very, it was small initially when I got there and became larger as I was there longer. Everyone was very vested in trying to do the work and also try to make sure that we were all up to speed in the law. And we, twice, we were given felony drug trials to try, which was totally out of our comfort zone. We did involuntary commitment trials. We did some welfare fraud and some custodial interference, but straight felony drug trials was something different for us. So we banded together over that, and we felt very connected to Norm and his philosophy. And
Norm Mailing, the former
Yes.
King County prosecuting attorney, of course.
Yes, and we felt totally connected to one another, and it was a great experience, which I think is why I stayed there so long.
You know, over the last 20 years, we've seen some shift in how we approach young offenders, juvenile offenders. The goal, obviously, is to try and decrease the numbers of juvenile offenders that are entering the juvenile justice system. Are we, in fact, seeing a shift in how the court system approaches and deals with these young offenders to try and reduce those numbers? Have you seen that shift over the years?
Absolutely.
How
I think
so?
We've gone from the idea that there are bad kids that need to be punished to are there alternatives to keep them from getting this record that can follow them long term and create a pattern in their future that perhaps if we'd just given them another opportunity, they would not have had. So I think we really are looking for alternatives to certainly incarceration. We're looking at the why as opposed to just the results of their behavior. And, you know, all of the science about brain function and development, we're really looking at that closely and figuring out, you know, full frontal lobe development is key to judgment, and kids just don't have that. And so we should treat them differently because of it.
You know, on another subject, unfortunately, we're seeing just the amount of gun violence in our county go up, and certainly it dominates the news on a regular basis. As someone who's on the front lines that sees this, is that something that you're seeing an increase? Is just the amount of crimes that a gun is involved in, as either as a weapon or just simply someone had it when they were committing the crime? Is the proliferation of guns out there? How much of an effect is that having on the criminal justice system, do you think?
I don't know if it's an increase or if it has increased to the degree that it seems it has been. Certainly it's in the news, and certainly there seem to be more crimes where a gun is involved, or when people are arrested, oftentimes guns are found on them. Our society as a whole has a relationship with firearms that goes back so, you know, from our inception.
Right.
And so to sort of separate that from the criminal justice system is not possible. And I think, you know, there are things that flow from that, and certainly the use of guns and the prevalence of guns is on the forefront of everyone's mind. Certainly there's an increase. I don't know if it's as dramatic as it seems when we look at it.
You know, on a personal note, your husband is a musician. I would say, venture to say, a professional musician, if you will. What type of music is he involved in?
He plays R&B and some jazz. He's a bass guitar player, and he's had sort of straight jobs in addition to music. But since he's been about 13, he's played music his entire life and has been able to support himself doing that for the most part.
That's wonderful. Does he go on tour at all?
You know, when he was younger, he did much more so. Now he'll go maybe a week or so at the most, but for the most part, he plays around here or within easy driving distance.
Wonderful. I love the bass guitar. Judge Lori Smith, thank you for being our guest today.
It was my pleasure.
We appreciate you coming down. That's our show, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. Join us again for another 15 minutes. We'll see you soon.